your tax consultant, Mr. James. Hey, Ev,
Yes, can you
Everett.
hear me?
Oh, loud and clear, loud and clear. Okay.
Wonderful.
Hey, what's on the table? What's on the table
Well,
today, my friend?
we're just following, President Trump's signature domestic policy bill, which is back, at the House of Representatives. I'll bring you up to date on
Okay.
all of the politics. And then if we have time, we'll get into some things that you may or may not know, 9 things you may or may not know about Social Security.
All right. Looking forward to hearing it for it. I know the entire country and perhaps the world is trying to follow this bill that a lot of people are calling a disaster. Kicking people
Uh-huh.
off of Medicare, Medicaid. Perhaps you can chime in on that as well. So I'm going to sit back and listen to hear what you have to say, my friend.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Brown, and welcome, listening
All
audience.
right.
This
Thank
is
you.
Everett. Yes, and this is Eb
No, thank you.
James. Yes, Eb James from the West Coast, coming to you every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. On the West Coast. On the East Coast, that would be 1 p.m. And we're here for not only your education, but also for questions and participation. So please take advantage of this opportunity. We can be sent questions and comments by calling 951 522 9877. That's 951 522 9877. And those for those that are more comfortable with with the email, evjtax1, just the number one, at gmail.com. That's evjtax1 at gmail.com. And we'll make every opportunity, every effort to repeat that information before we conclude the hour's information. So we are looking forward to what is going to happen in the House of Representatives. It's back now in the House of Representatives' hands. After having just cleared the Senate, and as you may have heard, Senate Republicans have passed President Trump's signature domestic policy bill. Now, this sets up the stage for a final vote in the House of Representatives on legislation, really, that would literally cost trillions of dollars while scaling back spending on Medicaid, food assistance, and clean energy programs. The final vote in the Senate was 51 to 50, with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking a tie. Three Republicans broke ranks and voted against the bill, and these are familiar names. Whenever there is any type of a America First bill that's being considered, Susan Collins of Maine, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Kentucky's Rand Paul. The bill has now come back to the House, where the some Republican lawmakers are already signaling major objections. Wow! But Tuesday's vote in the Senate, it finished off weeks of contentious negotiations between fiscal hawks who wanted deeper spending cuts and just a handful of other Republicans who expressed concerns that cuts in the bill could have deep impacts across the country. Well, the bill would extend the tax cuts that were passed by Republicans in 2017. And we've mentioned that oftentimes, the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017 that became effective in 2018. But those cuts prevented a hike in the rates at the end of this year. So if they don't do anything about really the temporary tax cuts that were passed back in 2017, wow, yeah, there's going to be a significant increase in everybody's taxes. Republicans are offsetting some of those costs with cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, in other words, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And of course, there are cuts in the current negotiations to Medicaid. That's the joint federal and state program that provides health care for roughly 70 million low income, elderly, and disabled Americans. Of course, what they don't tell you is that the reason for the cuts are not only various types of fraud, but the ongoing fraud from the illegal population that is encouraging states to somehow manage to put or extend eligibility to folks who don't even have any business being here, the folks who've come illegally. These programs are for citizens, not illegal entrance to the country. The early estimates suggest around 11 million people could lose coverage under the currently sponsored GOP bill. Facing a lot of growing pressure from the White House, Republicans were also able to strike a delicate balance and pass a bill with just a few days before President Trump's self-imposed July 4th deadline. The vote once again highlighted President Trump's ability to unify very, very fractious wings inside the GOP. Now, with the legislation, they're hopeful of fulfilling a mandate that they were entrusted with in last November's election, and setting the country and the American people up to be a safer, stronger, and more prosperous. Even as the Republicans celebrated the vote in the Senate, the mega bill still faces a steep climb before reaching the president's desk. You didn't know that really to get that bill through. Wow, they had to use a special budget tool known as reconciliation. By doing so, the party was able to sidestep a Democratic filibuster and pass the bill with a simple majority. With the simple majority, all that's necessary is a majority of 60 votes. But the legislation also needed to fit strict Senate rules that require all of the elements to be primarily related to budget and spending. And that meant a lot of GOP priorities are stripped from the legislation before the final vote. Republicans in the House and Senate now, have to agree on identical versions of the bill before sending the legislation to Trump for his signature. Now, the Senate version may not satisfy the many divided factions of the narrow majority, GOP majority in the House. But what was actually in the mega bill, the Republican mega bill? Well, getting that Senate bill through the House without further changes will be now will be a crucial test for House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana. For weeks now, Johnson has pleaded with the Senate to keep any changes to a minimum. He was able to squeak the bill through by a single vote the first time, but he relied heavily on President Trump to win over a lot of last-minute holdouts. With Republicans clinging to a razor-thin majority in the House, their margin for error indeed will be small. Following the Senate vote, Johnson said in the statement that the House would work quickly to pass that bill by the 4th of July. That's the self-imposed deadline set up by President Trump. The American people in the last popular vote gave the Republicans a clear mandate, and after 4 years of Democratic failure, they do intend to deliver without delay. The tax cuts had been paired up with cuts to the social safety net. The broad outlines of the Senate measure, which we just saw pass, largely reflect the version of the bill that the House Republicans passed back in May. Both would spend trillions of dollars, of course, to extend the 2017 tax cuts while steering more money to the military and immigration enforcement. Both would also make good on several of Trump's campaign pledges. No taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips, and also he's hopeful that there'll be minimal taxes imposed on Social Security benefits. Wouldn't we all like that? The two chambers, however, the House and the Senate, really are split over how to pay for that spending. And some House Republicans are flatly calling changes made by the Senate much of a non-starter for them. One of of course, the biggest areas targeted for savings is Medicaid. And that's in California. That's called, it's Medi-Cal. That's the name of it in California, but it's Medicaid, only with the California blend, and the Medicaid in all the other states in the country. House Republicans really did try to cut down on that price tag, in part through new work requirements for folks who do not have any kids and folks without disabilities. The Senate plan expanded those requirements to the parents of older children. Of course, in the highlight has been, or in the spotlight has been the Medicaid program. The Democrats keep claiming that it gets more popular as Republicans try to cut it by $800 million. The Senate also moved to try to rein in what are known as provider taxes. That is, taxes states have used to secure more federal matching dollars for Medicaid. To alleviate lawmakers who said the change risked the collapse of many rural hospitals, the Senate ultimately included a new $50 billion fund to support rural hospitals. That program would begin next year, and the funds would be spread out over 5 years. But, following the vote, as usual, Collins said she's unable to support the legislation, even after leaders included more money to support rural hospitals. So here she's been pushing rural hospitals, and then when money is included, she still objects and votes against the overall Republican plan. She wrote in the statement she supports extending tax relief for families and small businesses. But she says, my vote against this bill stems primarily from the harmful impact it will have on Medicaid, affecting low-income families and rural health providers like our hospitals and nursing homes. Well, yeah, but the reason that they're cutting back on Medicaid is obviously incursion from folks who have broken, our immigration laws and somehow managed to get funding for Medicaid coverage. It's not for folks who are not citizens. Rand Paul said he could have supported the package had it not included a provision to lift the nation's borrowing authority by $5 trillion. Well, he criticized changes that were made to win the support of Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska. Those included a reprieve for her state from the new work requirements to qualify for the SNAP program, or that Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. But that still didn't get her vote. Despite all of the backdoor attempting to purchase her vote, then none of it worked. She claimed that the people in her state are the ones I put first. While we do not have a perfect bill by any stretch of the imagination, Murkowski said, but her hope is that the House is yet going to look at this and recognize that we're not there yet. This wide sweeping bill, and it clocks in at over 1,000 pages or close to 1,000 pages. It would have all kind of changes across a wide variety of policy areas. In addition to spending cuts for SNAP, that Supplemental Nutrition Program, the bill commits billions of dollars to border security. It overhauls the federal student loan program, and it ends the $7,500 credit for buying an electric car that was passed as part of former President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. So I think I had warned in a previous program that anybody looking to use that credit or take advantage of that federal credit for buying an electric car, new car or used car, doesn't have a lot of time left because it had originally been scheduled to last until the early 1930s, or I should say 2030s. But it's now, going to, there is an attempt being made, in this new mega bill to eliminate that credit altogether. In addition to that, there's all kinds of tensions over the deficit. Another big tension point is just how much to increase the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is certainly going to be increased. The increase in that limit doesn't authorize necessarily any new spending. Rather, it just allows the government to pay for programs they had already authorized. Get this, the increase of debt limit that doesn't just authorize the government to pay for what is already authorized. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has told Congress that without action, the U.S. will be at risk of potentially catastrophic default on his debt as early as August of this year. Now, the nonpartisan CBO, that's the Congressional Budget Office, found that the Senate bill would add more than $3 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. Extending the 2017 tax cuts make up the bulk of that cost, but other changes have added to the bottom line. It's interesting that one of the persons who has voted against the omnibus bill, Senator Tom Tillis, and it's interesting to note that he is not going to seek re-election next year after going through this struggle and winding up not supporting the omnibus bill. The Senate really did change how the bill handles the deduction for state and local income taxes. That was pivotal pivotal. That was important in getting the votes of GOP lawmakers in the House from blue states with high taxes. So the SALT cap as the deduction, and that stands for state and local taxes. That deduction that is being presented with a possible increase, and it's got both Senate and the House members' support, but they're now, that's been included in the Senate bill that's currently now being reconciled with the finalized House bill, and that's the proposal there is upping that or increasing that $10,000 limitation on what you can deduct on in local taxes on your Schedule A. But that has been proposed and approved thus far by both houses to go from $10,000 to $40,000 for married couples, and that goes up. That allows them to write off that much in state and local taxes, up to $40,000. However, it phases out if the married couples, if their income exceeds $500,000, $500,000. It's the Senate plan that just came moved to the House for reconciliation. That keeps that new threshold in place, but the provision would expire after 2028. So you see, it would just have basically a 3-year or 4-year shelf life, you might say. The bill also targets other clean energy credits passed as part of the IRA. The Senate agreed to roll back credits for wind and solar cuts that were included in the House budget to help win over fiscal hawks from the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus. So that plan would cut out roughly over $500 billion in investments, many of which are based in red states. The Democrats in the Senate have been united in opposing the bill, and they attempted to delay the eventual vote by requesting the full bill be read on the Senate floor over the weekend. They put forth numerous amendments and all kinds of additional attempts to delay consideration of the mega bill. And they, as I mentioned, they put forth a stream of proposed amendments that the Republicans ultimately struck down. In a press conference after the vote, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat from New York, rallied against the bill and said Democrats would continue to highlight what they see as negative consequences. Okay, so in any case, let's say the White House is, now that it's passed the Senate, that Senate step, is that additional step closer to, additional step closer to being passed. One thing that should be made aware of, the White House is close to defunding public radio. The House had voted to claw back all federal funding for public media. So for folks who are of the conservative thinking, many folks see themselves as running out of time to protect public radio's essential news, and that is conservative public radio. And of course, that's widely broadcast over automobile radio, in-home radios, and to be honest, with conservative radio views, there's relatively few other options to get their news and information out. In any case, there are proposals and movements to say public media, and that I'll keep you up to date on that. The Just looking at the what's going to happen now in this consideration of Trump's mega bill. I'll tell you, Mike Johnson, who's the House, Speaker, boy, he's going to have to make a lot of promises to get that bill to Trump's desk. Those promises may wind up really getting the strong disapproval from the Freedom Caucus. What are some of the remaining sticking points with the mega bill that the House is going to be focusing on? They've got the responsibility now. House of Representatives has the responsibility now of doing the concessions with what has come out of the Senate. And as you'll recall, that bill in the Senate was an absolute tie, and that called for President J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, to cast the tie-breaking vote. And that was after more than 24 hours of resistance, including some resistance from Republicans. And now it could be equally tricky for Trump allies to pass the bill through the House, where Speaker Mike Johnson hopes to hold a vote as early as Wednesday. Well, I would not. This observably would not really expect a vote as early as today, or even next Wednesday. The lower chamber, of course, approved an earlier version of the bill in May with only one vote, and now the bill has to be reconciled with the Senate version. Both chambers, both the Senate and the House, are controlled by Trump's Republicans, but they're really they're fighting over key provisions in this very lengthy legislation. Sticking points include the question of how much the bill will add to the national deficit, and how deeply it will cut into health care, such as Medicaid and other social programs. Despite previous signs of rebellion against Trump at Congress, Republicans have ultimately fallen in line. What's at stake? Well, it's really the defining piece of legislation. What are some of those factions that are standing in the way? Well, facing intense pressure, the House had to decide if Trump's bill was a go. What's in the Trump's budget bill? What is what is coming from the deficit hawks? The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimated that the version that was passed this past Tuesday by the Senate, that it could add $3.2 trillion to the U.S. deficit over the next 10 years. And so that deficit could mean the difference between the U.S. government spends. It really is talking about what it spends and what revenue it receives. This has really outraged the fiscal hawks in the conservative House Freedom Committee, who really did threaten to tank the entire bill at one point. Many of them are echoing claims made by Elon Musk, Trump's former advisor, and they've really have lashed out at lawmakers for even considering anything or any additional spending that would add to the national debt. And it's been called unconscionable by many folks from the GOP, with Congressman Ralph Norman from Carolinas. He's a Freedom Caucus member. He called the move unconscionable. So there's been a lot of opposition. Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris of Tennessee told Fox Net, told the Fox News service that the United States just cannot sustain these deficits. So on Thursday, a conservative Congressman Andy Ogles went as far as to say that wow, the Senate version of the bill, he called it a dud. Meanwhile, Ohio Republican Warren Davidson went on the airwaves and said this, that he would promise to cut spending. Cut spending. He added that it appears nothing will stop this runaway train. He called it a fatal overdose of government. So there's a lot of Republicans who really, have strong concerns, deep concerns about the largesse of the president's tax bill. Representatives regarding Medicaid, representatives from poorer districts are worried about the Senate bill, which just got passed, harming their constituents, claiming it's going to hurt them at the polls, and of course, you'll hear a lot of attacks coming from, particularly from the Democratic side of the aisle, about the cuts in Medicaid, which the states have abused. Abused some of the expectations they've had, in just receiving Medicaid benefits, but they've abused those rules by somehow managing to cover folks who are not from this country and who have not come to the country legally, but have included a large number of folks in that category under Medicaid, particularly California. So with folks who are living in some higher income states, such as Connecticut, New Jersey, New Hampshire, New York, this mega bill also deals with the question of how much taxpayers can deduct from the amount they pay in federal taxes. And of course, a lot of that it depends on what they can get are able to deduct on the Schedule A through their state and local taxes. As you know, the current law from 2017 limits that amount of money that can be deducted on Schedule A to $10,000. But as I mentioned earlier, both the Senate and the House version now have approved increasing this all the way up to $40,000. And then with the phase out for folks who are married, if they have incomes exceeding $500,000. The so the uh, In the Senate approved version, that our cap would return, or the limitation would return to $10,000. This could pose a problem for some Republicans. Okay, so what did just get passed in the Senate? Now that we're past that hurdle, and this will give you an idea what is going to have to be reconciled in the House of Representatives. The At some 880 some pages, that legislation from the Senate was a sprawling collection of tax breaks, spending cuts, and other Republican priorities, including new money for national defense and new money for deportations. President Donald Trump has admonished Republicans who hold majority power in the House and the Senate to skip their holiday vacations and deliver the bill by the 4th of July, this Friday. And I would imagine that there will not be many Republicans who skip the 4th of July, as I'm sure the majority of certainly the majority of folks on the other side of the aisle, Democrats, are not going to skip that holiday. Democrats remain totally united against the legislation, but they really are powerless to stop the bill if the Republicans are united. So, as we've just seen, the Senate just passed their version of the bill. As I mentioned, with the Vice President casting a tie-breaking vote, and I mentioned that the House passed an earlier version of the bill in May with just one vote to spare. Talk about close votes. So here's the latest on what was in the Senate bill. And that means there could be some changes as they continue to negotiate these, now that the bill has shifted back to the House. Tax cuts are the priority. Republicans say the bill is crucial because there would be a massive tax increase after December, when the tax breaks from Trump's first term expire. So they're really looking, they're really depending on, many of these provisions from the 2017 tax law, to be amended and updated and reapproved. Hopefully, that will get those amendments. Hopefully, they will be approved. The total legislation really contains about $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. The existing tax rates and brackets would become permanent under the bill, under the mega bill. It temporarily would add new tax breaks that Trump campaigned on, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime pay, um, limited taxes on Social Security benefits, the ability to deduct interest payments for some automotive loans. Wow. Hey, that takes us back a few years. And then there would be a $6,000 deduction for older adults who earn no more than $75,000 a year. Hey, I'm sure that there's a large number of folks who fit into that category and who you might even guesstimate might be smiling, at this moment. Um, the mega bill that's being reviewed and reconciled now in the House, it would increase the $2,000 child tax credit to 2,200. Boy, oh boy, they just can't. The tax legislators just cannot let that child tax credit alone. That has seen more increases in order to buy the votes in various ways. But that I would think that the legislators are saying, well, we're we're touching and changing all the other credits. We might as well not let the child tax credit go untouched. Um, with this under the proposal in the mega bill, millions of families at the lower income levels um, however, not get the full credit. You just get a partial credit. The limitation on state and local deductions called SALT, state and local income taxes, that could quadruple to $40,000 for 5 years. I have a feeling that may just pass or something very, very close to it. In order to get those votes from the higher higher earning and higher tax income states, they would allow that to remain in the final bill that goes to the president's desk. Of course, it's a provision that's important in New York and all the other high tax states. Though the House actually just wanted it to last for 10 years, but I think there's gonna be enough weight from the legislators in those higher income states and high tax states to get it to last for significantly longer than 5 years. There's sources. There's all kind of business-related tax cuts, including allowing businesses to immediately write off 100% of the cost of equipment and research. The wealthiest households in the country, they would see a $12,000 increase from the legislation, and that would cost the poorest people $1,600 a year. That's according to the Congressional Budget Office. Middle income bracket taxpayers would see a tax break of $500 to $1,500. That's what the CBO was the Congressional Budget Office is predicting. Money would be set aside for deportations, for a border wall, and for the Golden Dome. Well, the bill would provide some $350 billion for Trump's border and national security agenda, including $46 billion for the U.S.-Mexico border wall, and $45 billion for 100,000 migrant detention facility beds, as Trump aims to fulfill his promise of the largest mass deportation operation in U.S. history. And why not? we've just had the largest, a mass illegal immigration invasion of the United States ever. Why not? Respond with the largest deportation of folks who had no business sneaking across the border. Money would go for hiring 10,000 new immigration and custom enforcement officers with $10,000 signing bonuses and a whole surge of Border Patrol officers as well. The goal is to deport some million people per year. That is absolutely humongous. The the so the Judging from the last election, the majority of the vote was backing up this pledge by President Trump. The the Homeland Security Secretary of Homeland Security, would have a new $10 billion fund for grants for states that actually help with federal immigration enforcement and deportation action. So, as you can see, the emphasis is going to be on immigration enforcement and deportation as well. To help pay for it, immigrants would face various new fees, including when seeking asylum protections. For the Pentagon, the bill would provide billions for shipbuilding, munitions systems, and the quality of life measure for servicemen and the women, as well as $25 billion for the development of the Golden Dome missile defense system. And wow, I know when people first heard, and certainly this broadcaster first heard about that Golden Dome missile defense system, I kept thinking, oh, that's not going to really be an absolute necessity for the United States, because, the Golden Dome has been associated with Israel and their their dome anti-missile system, thinking that this country would have enough miles away from those who would seek to harm Americans. But no, that's with all of the developments in ultrasonic transport of nuclear weapons. Now, that's something that's very relevant now to Americans here in this country, thousands of miles away from the Mideast. So they would be designating $25 billion for the development of the Golden Dome missile defense system in this country. The Defense Department would have $1 billion for border security. Well, the question arises, now how are we going to pay for all this? Particularly one of the major ways is through cuts to Medicaid and other programs. There is a major effort from the Republican side of the floor to cut back on Medicaid and food assistance for the poor. Republicans argue they're trying to right-size the safety net programs for the population they were initially designed to serve, mainly pregnant women, the disabled, and children, and root out what they describe as waste, fraud, and abuse, primarily abuse coming from the immigrant entries into the country. The package includes a new 80-hour-a-month work requirement for a lot of adults receiving Medicaid and food stamps, including older people up to age 65. Parents of kids 14 and older would have to meet the program's work requirements. There's also a proposed new $35 co-payment that could be charged to patients using Medicaid services. I really don't see anything wrong with that, because after all, for in return for getting Medicaid coverage, look what you get for a measly $35 copayment. More than 71 million people rely on Medicaid. That got expanded, of course, under Obama's Affordable Care Act, and 40 million used the SNAP program, that Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Most of these folks already work. The Congressional Budget Office does estimate that 11 million more Americans would become uninsured by 2034 if the bill became law, and 3 million more would not qualify for food stamps, also known as SNAP benefits. Republicans are looking to have states pick up some of the costs for the SNAP benefits, for that supplemental nutrition program. Currently, the federal government funds all benefit costs. But now under the bill, this mega bill, states beginning in 2028, about 3 years down the road, they'll be required to contribute a set percentage of those costs if their payment error rate exceeds 6%. Payment errors include both underpayments and overpayments. I've often wondered how what that definition is of error rate, but it does include underpayments and overpayments, and I can see how they would and want to keep track of that. But the Senate bill temporarily delays the start date of that cost sharing for states, with the highest, and that would be a delay for the states that have the highest error rates. Alaska has the highest error rate in the nation at nearly 25%, according to agricultural data. Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, had fought for the exception, but she was the decisive vote in getting the bill through the Senate. So hats off, to Lisa Murkowski for at least getting behind that bill and getting that back to the House where it can be, where a consensus can be worked out, making it possible to go to the president's desk. Now, would the new mega bill be a death sentence for clean energy? Well, Republicans are proposing to dramatically roll back those tax breaks designed to boost clean energy projects fueled by renewable sources such as energy and wind. The tax breaks, of course, were a central component of President Joe Biden's 2022 landmark bill that actually focused on climate change and lowering healthcare costs. Democratic Oregon Senator Ron Wyden went so far as to call the GOP provisions a death sentence for America's wind and solar industries and an inevitable hike in utility bills. Folks, for those who might be considering trying to access and benefit or actually benefit from the electric vehicle energy credits, keep in mind that as of now, folks, that tax break is going to be expiring on September 30th of this year. So July, August, September, 3 months, folks, that you have to access this energy credit and pick up a new or electric vehicle. I'm sure the used electric vehicles are also included, are still included, but that expires as of September 30th of this year. Originally, it was due to expire at the end of 2032. So you can see the impact of the new of this new administration. The Meanwhile, there's a tax credit for the production of critical materials, and that is expanded to include metallurgical coal used in steel making. Wow, that's interesting. There's a number of other extra provisions that reflect other GOP priorities. Believe it or not, there's a provision that would increase the debt limit by $5 trillion to allow continued borrowing to pay already accrued bills. I would imagine that measure to increase the debt limit itself by $5 trillion. I'm afraid I don't see how they're going to not be able to pass that the increase in the debt limit. So before we close, the original question was about will the TCJA tax cuts legislation from 2017 will they actually be expanded? Will they actually be will this whole 2017 tax law be amended? It was passed back in 2017 by a majority Republican Congress. It was the largest tax code overhaul in almost nearly 30 years. As you recall, that tax law cut the corporate tax rate to 21%. It limited deductions for state and local taxes at $10,000. It doubled the standard deduction and expanded the child tax credit. It was passed by reconciliation legislation, meant the bill was overridden by the typical, meaning that bill overrode typical filibuster rules, and it was allowed to be passed with a simple majority of 51 votes. A lot of the, however, of the provisions of the 2017 law were made temporary, and that was to keep the costs down and comply with the Byrd Rule. What is the Byrd Rule? Well, that prohibits reconciliation bills from raising the federal deficit beyond the 10-year budget window or making any changes to Social Security. And as again, the Byrd Rule, it prohibits reconciliation bills from raising the federal deficit beyond the 10-year budget window or making any changes to Social Security. Did the 21% corporate tax rate expire? Well, it cut the corporate tax rate to 21% from 35%, and that does not expire. Potential expiration of the corporate tax rate do pose a lot of implications for U.S. businesses, including changes to the corporate tax rate, capital expenditure, and the pass-through income deductions. The pass-through income tax deduction, sole proprietorships, partnerships, and S corporations, they will no longer be able to deduct up to 20% of a qualified business income when calculating annual taxes. So that if that pass-through income tax deduction is not updated and is not amended. But if that is not amended, all of those businesses will no longer be able to deduct that 20% of qualified business income. 100% bonus provisions allowing deduction of capital investments, they'll be phased out by 2027. And the 2025 current year bonus depreciation rate will be reduced to 50%. Business interest deductions will go back to what was in place before the 2017 tax law. And what did that allow? That allowed business interest expenses to be deducted any year the interest was paid or accrued, with some limitations. We're all eyes are on the TCJA tax provisions. So keep in mind that if Congress does not renew or amend the 2017 tax provisions, then individual filers will see an increase in their tax rates. They'll see a lower standing deduction, which is not good if you're doing your taxes. And they'll see changes to itemized deductions, and they'll see the rollback of that child tax credit. It really does affect a lot of young families. And if it expires, if that TCGA expires at the end of 2025 and is not amended, the marginal tax rates for individuals will go back to what it was before the 2017 law. And generally, Democrats are hoping to raise that top rate back up from 37% now to 39.6%. So keep in mind that 2000 law nearly doubled the standing deduction for both single and joint filers when it went into effect in 2018. But once that expires, at the end of this year, the standard deduction will return to that pre-2017 level. Once that TCJA expires, single and joint filers will be able to claim a mortgage interest deduction on properties up to $1 million. That's what it was before the 2017 law changed. Between 2018 and 2025, they limited the mortgage interest deduction to $750,000 in property value. Charitable contributions will go back to 50% from 60% of AGI, which has been in place since the 2017 law was passed. And keep in mind that if it does get changed, the $10,000 SALT limitation will no longer apply, and we can go back to reporting, almost unlimited state and local taxes. The child tax credit will return to $1,000 per child. Right now it's $2,000, folks. But if the 2000 law isn't changed, it goes back to $1,000 per child. So, folks, I think we're probably near the end of this week's presentation, and we will look forward to talking to you next week. Please take part with your comments and questions by calling 951-522-9877 or by email evjtax1@gmail.com.
All right, Ev. Hey, thank you so much.
July 4th, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Hey, great information, Ev, as usual. And guys, you can check out Ev each and every Wednesday, 10 a.m. on the West Coast, 1 p.m. here on the East Coast, and noon Central Standard Time. And keep it locked right here. Come back tonight for Cultural Excellence with yours truly. I'll be playing music and having a lot of fun. So enjoy your Wednesday.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Studio W, The Buzz. Wednesday night soul set.